Hi, my name is Lauren Leipold. I am a partner at Seyfarth Shaw, and I'm joined here with my partner and co-editor of the Gadgets, Gigabytes, and Goodwill intellectual property blog, Owen Wolfe. Owen, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Lauren. Thanks for having me. And I'm very excited to introduce our special guest today, Stephen Marr, my former colleague from Sullivan and Cromwell and current in-house counsel at Odeko. Stephen, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
And we're glad to have you join us. Would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and your legal practice?
Sure. So as you previewed, we used to be colleagues at Sullivan and Cromwell. It's where I started off my career. We were both in the litigation department. I was there for several years and then decided to go in-house. So this was now back in 2017, went in-house to WeWork, which was relatively unknown at the time, but obviously has been in the news a bit over the past few years. I was there for about 5.5 years, and was there between 2017 to mid 2022, about 6 months after the company went public. So a lot happened during that time. It was an exciting time to be heading up the litigation and investigations team. And then I've now been in my current role, which is the general counsel of a startup called Odeko. We're a Series D company, been here for about 2 years. Uh, and we, I guess the brief explanation of what Odeko does is we work with local cafes and coffee shops and similar establishments and help them a lot on the back end of what they do. So the operations side, so inventory management, supply chain, making sure that they can serve their customers effectively and try to minimize the workload on them. So I've been at that company for a couple of years now, and I started as the general counsel, and over the past couple of years, I've expanded my role a little bit. So in addition to legal, I now oversee other functions, including HR, the comms team, corp dev, and risk, which includes fun stuff like insurance. So a lot of different things.
Wow. Well, I have to ask because Owen and I have been really following issues related to AI pretty closely lately. Are you using AI in your day-to-day?
So currently, I'm not using it a ton when it comes to the legal side of the things that I do. When I was at WeWork, we actually did use AI assisted tools a bit on the litigation side, and mainly this was document review. So you have a lot of document review obligations when you're in litigation and investigations, and we worked with a couple of our legal tech providers to basically help us do document review with the assistance of machine learning or AI tools. And then you would have attorneys review the results of those of what those tools spit out. That was obviously a little more on the machine learning side of AI versus generative AI, but it definitely helped us in terms of being able to review more efficiently. And then here at Odeko, we have a pretty small team, so we aren't really at the point where it makes sense as a legal function to invest heavily in AI-assisted tools. Um, that being said, I actually think there's a really great potential for those types of tools in the legal industry specifically, and I know there are a lot of legal tech companies that are making a lot of advancements in various areas of the law and in within the legal industry generally. Uh, and funny enough, the company that I work for, Odeko, they actually started out as an AI enabled company. So back in 2018 or 2019, uh, the idea that our founder originally came up with was that the way that Odeko could help their customers was by helping them with predictive ordering. So, when you get low on your oat milk or your cups, that we would have an AI assisted tool that would remind you need to order more and help you manage your inventory that way. That like a lot of startups, the kind of uh, service offering evolved over time. But we're actually, 5, 6 years later, kind of getting back to AI in some of the things that we're developing. So we're actually in the process of piloting a couple of services and tools that are AI assisted, and we're hoping will help our customers to be able to service their end customers more effectively.
Very cool. Yeah, you brought up a great point that some forms of AI have been around in the legal industry for quite some time now. And I guess the form of AI that everybody's talking about right now is the one you mentioned, generative AI. And I'm just wondering, you mentioned that there are some potential opportunities when it comes to the use of AI in the legal industry. Do you think right now that in-house counsel specifically should be using and exploring generative AI?
I do, and I think there's a few different applications. One of them that I play around with more than using it more officially in what I do, but I'll sometimes go to, generative AI tools and ask them to write first drafts of letters for me. And it's mainly because I'm curious to see, what the program thinks is an effective demand letter or other type of letter. And it's actually not too bad. I think a lot of it depends on the prompts that you give the tool, but there is, I think, real value, especially for some of these tools to be able to do initial drafts of things for in-house lawyers. And as in-house counsel, we have a lot of demands on our time, and we end up doing a lot of work that isn't necessarily strictly legal in nature. And so for some of those things, I think it's actually a really effective way to allow us to use our time more effectively. It's almost like having a very junior associate taking a first stab at putting together a letter. And then you basically have to, mark it up a bunch, but I think it helps with that sort of thing. Another area I've seen that seems pretty promising is using AI in terms of contract review. And again, that's a little bit probably more machine learning than anything. If you're analyzing contracts and provisions and telling the user, are these terms market or are these terms similar to, X% of the contracts that are in your repository. But I have seen some tools at least claim to be able to help draft provisions that, have certain components. And I think a lot of this is moving very quickly and still being, updated and figured out in real time. But it does seem like the sort of thing that you should be able to leverage generative AI for. So I think there's real promise there. And again, for in-house counsel, those are tools that could be really effective when you have a lot of things on your plate.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so you talked about a lot of the potential benefits. I'm wondering if you see any potential risks specifically for in-house counsel that may be starting to toy around with some of this new technology.
Yeah, I guess lawyers love looking at risk, and so there's definitely some things that you have to keep in mind when you're even when you're playing around with these tools. One of them is making sure that you're maintaining confidentiality over your data. So I think most of these tools have options that you can check or uncheck that kind of say whether your data is being used for some additional purposes. And so just making sure you understand what you're agreeing to when you use the tool, and review the terms of service to understand how your data may or may not be used or anonymized. And then there's obviously the concern that probably gives a lot of us lawyers the most heartache, which is the potential for malpractice. And we saw this, in that lawsuit where the AI tool basically made up a bunch of cases that didn't exist. So I think that's more of an issue that just solidifies that you do need to have some sort of lawyer or human individual overseeing the work product that's being created by these tools, and make sure that you're kind of managing that. And then another risk, I guess, would be for a lot of these generative AI tools, it probably the quality of the work product will depend in large part on the data that's being fed into the tool. So the whole like garbage in, garbage out. So if your tool is not geared toward the legal industry or not specific toward the type of work product that you're trying to create, then I think, you just will want to make sure that what is actually being generated is something that makes sense and is useful and, actually works for the purpose that you intend it. And again, that goes back to making sure that there's human intervention and oversight whenever you're using any of these tools.
So you don't think that AI will eventually take over our jobs, I guess?
Sometimes I wish they would, so then I wouldn't have to, do this all day. But no, I don't think that will ever be the case. I think you're always going to need oversight. And I think one of the advantages is that actually one of the things that I see AI being able to do is to take over some of the more menial tasks or the tasks that are less thinking and strategizing and more just rote work. So simple document review and diligence and that sort of thing. So I think one of the potential advantages for, especially for lawyers who are starting out in their careers is, like Owen and I, who when we were first years spent probably way too much time doing document review. I think there's real potential for those lawyers today, instead of just spending most of their time doing the actual review, to be overseeing review or reviewing the work that an AI assisted tool has done. So it actually allows you to kind of leverage AI tools to be able to do more high impact work earlier on in your careers.
Well, that's a really interesting point because document review in particular is something you might outsource to outside counsel. Are there different considerations in that context when you're talking about outside counsel? I mean, do you think that they should or shouldn't be using AI?
So I think law firms and outside counsel definitely should be using AI, and maybe even more than in-house counsel. I think law firms are actually pretty uniquely positioned to be able to take advantage of these sort of tools. And one of the big reasons for that is just the access to data that they have compared to an individual company. Obviously, you need to make sure you're getting all the consents you need and going through whatever process that the firm has put into place. But I'm a employee of a single company. I have access to my company's data set, but a law firm has dozens or hundreds of clients. And again, as long as you're following the process you have in place, potentially has access to a much more significant data set. And it's not just across clients, but it's across different industries. So I think there's an increased potential there for law firms to be able to, pilot or use AI tools that are probably going to be more effective at getting results than what I would be able to get at my company. And I actually I co-wrote an article that kind of relates to this topic last year in March. The article itself was not on AI specifically, but it was more on what law firms can do to basically provide value add services to their clients. I think I might have run the article by Owen for review before we published it, but it was on a bunch of, it was basically a list of those sort of things that firms can do. And I think we spent a couple paragraphs talking about law firms being able to use AI assisted tools to better serve their clients.
And then I wonder if there's risks associated with that too, if you're talking about different clients' data and, there's probably some thorny privilege issues there to navigate.
Yeah. I think that's definitely the case. I mean, privilege is one thing, especially if, you're not anonymizing the data or depending on how you're using it. I think another risk, I guess it's a risk for law firms, is how it impacts revenue. So obviously there's, as you become more efficient at doing this work, it kind of shifts the dynamic of things like the billable hour. And so I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I've seen some law firms actually use this to their advantage, where maybe it does mean you're not spending as many hours billing the client for document review, but you are able to market that you have a tool that can do that more efficiently for them, and it becomes a retentive tool for the client, where they understand the law firm is looking out for them and helping to manage their costs, and creates a more sticky relationship with the client in the long run. So there's a lot of like good and bad, I think, that comes with any technological advance. But I think, as with most of these advances, the firms and the companies that are kind of ahead of the curve and thinking about these issues farther in advance are going to end up on the more beneficial side in the long run.
So, talking about the potential impact on law firm revenue, in a few minutes ago, you mentioned the fact that more junior associates maybe will get freed up from doing tasks they do now and be able to do some other things. Are there any other impacts you see sort of in the long term for the legal industry as a result of AI?
Um, so I think those are two of the biggest ones, which is the kind of the type of work that's done by lawyers, especially more junior lawyers, and just the billing model or the economic model of law firms. Those are two, I guess those are two pretty big things. But one other potential that I do see there being when using AI tools becomes more and more common is, I think it will actually has the real potential to impact how negotiations work. So if you think about it, whenever you're negotiating a major contract, there's a certain number of terms that both sides really care about. And I think especially when you're, um, you know, able to have data sets that will tell you what most similar types of contracts look like in terms of those specific provisions. I think there is the potential where you could see reduced time of negotiation, maybe more and more contracts kind of landing with more middle of the road terms. I think one thing it does is it helps to create a little bit of parity. So before you might have had a much larger company negotiating with a much smaller company, and the larger company has a lot more access to what the market terms look like, and they've maybe done like 1,000 of these similar types of contracts, whereas the smaller company's only done one. If you eventually get to the point where it's much more accessible as to what terms commonly look like, then I think that makes the negotiations a lot more even. So I think that could have a pretty significant impact on mergers and acquisitions, on partnership agreements, that sort of thing going forward.
I think that's some really good insight into where we're headed. One last question for you. Is there anything about AI, maybe generative AI in particular, that really kind of keeps you up at night?
I think the well, the example I gave earlier, the sort of concern that AI has hallucinations that may result in creating product that sounds good but is not in fact good. So I think that's, again, goes back to the principle that you just need to have, you need to understand that you're using tools that aren't perfect, and there's still a role that you as a lawyer need to play in making sure that you're maintaining proper guardrails and controls around that. And then that kind of relates to the more broad point that these tools are and will increasingly become very useful, but we can't over rely on them. So they'll serve a purpose, but only to a certain extent. And I think, we just need to figure out where those limits are, and make sure that we're not relying on AI beyond what it can and should provide for us. So I think as long as we're maintaining kind of those core principles, I think, again, I'm very bullish on AI. I think there's huge amount of potential, especially within the legal industry, to save time, save money, create better results, but within the limits that should be set.
Excellent. Well, taking up a lot of your time. Really enjoyed this discussion. Really great insight, like Lauren said, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much for having me. Appreciate it.